Okay. Erin, can you give us a sound check?
Hi, everybody. This is Erin from Toronto. For those of you guys who've joined us, if you could mute the microphone, that will help us with the echo.
All right. Lisa, give yours a try again.
Let's test that again.
Well, it's gone now, so
excellent.
We seem to be okay at the moment. So I want to welcome people. It's 10:02. We should get started. We've had some funny problems as we've been testing this out this morning. Occasionally we get an echo that's showing up. But basically, we're here to share the results of the 30 by 30 Nature Challenge. And I am simply hosting from Vancouver. We have Erin Sheppard in Toronto and Dr. Lisa Nisbet joining us from Trent University. And they will be doing most of the talking, but if you would like to send in a question, send it to the administrator, to me, and I will collect them and ask them at a certain point. We decided not to have everybody talking just because we didn't know how many people we might get and how crazy that might be. So I would like to introduce Aryne Sheppard. She's our Senior Public Engagement Specialist for the David Suzuki Foundation in Toronto. She's going to tell us a little bit about what the 30 by 30 program was. I'm suspecting that most people on the line took part in it. So that's Erin's job, and then Lisa will be telling us what we learned. So over to you, Erin.
Hi, everybody. I'm so glad you could join us. This is me. If you can see me, I'm calling in from Toronto. We have a small little David Suzuki Foundation, but a growing foundation office here in the city in Ontario. The 30 by 30 challenge, you all know very well, was really about getting people into nature. And one of the questions I receive most often is, why is the David Suzuki Foundation interested in getting people into nature? What does that have to do with protecting the environment? And the interesting thing is, it actually has a lot to do with protecting the environment, because intuitively we know we're going to protect what we care about. So the 30 by 30 challenge at its heart is about helping people reestablish that connection to nature. Humans really do belong outside, but in our modern world where more and more Canadians are living in urban environments, we're not out in green space very often. So it's very hard to kind of establish and maintain a strong connection to nature. So for me, this was a very personal program. We started here in the Toronto office, and it became very quickly a national program, because even us here at the David Suzuki Foundation, we're behind our desks in front of our computers a lot of the time, which is kind of ironic because we're supposed to be out there protecting nature, and at the same time we're not spending a lot of time in it. So it is a very personal program, and all of the staff here at the foundation participated in the challenge as well. So we started last year. This was our second year and our first year doing a workplace wellness challenge, and I hope some of you, I know the town of Canmore is on the line, I know SAP in Vancouver is on the line, so thank you, and to all others who joined as a workplace or school. We're really excited to increase the scope of this program and incorporate wellness into the 30 by 30. And we certainly welcome your feedback, so please send me an email if you have any ideas for us in terms of growing the program for next year. So I want to introduce as well our colleague and partner in this campaign, Dr. Elizabeth, for Lisa Nisbet. I met Lisa over about a year ago now through her work, and we decided to work together this year on the 30 by 30 campaign. And Lisa is an assistant professor at Trent University in the psychology department, and her expertise is on the connectedness to nature, our subjective connection to nature, and how that links to health, well-being, and for us, strategically, environmental behavior. So we're really excited to work with Lisa. Welcome to anybody who's just joined. My name's Erin. I'm from the David Suzuki Foundation. If everybody could their microphone and we could reduce the echo, that would be wonderful. I'm just going to give you a little introduction, and I would like to pass it over in a second to Dr. Lisa Nisbet from Trent University, who's going to share the results. So maybe I'll say a few words on the we have them our way. And maybe I'll just turn it over right now to Lisa.
Hello, everybody. Hopefully we can get some clear sound coming through. I hope you can all hear me. Hello from lovely soggy and gray Peterborough today, but we have beautiful spring flowers. So it's a great day to get out there and enjoy some nature. I'm really excited to talk to you today about some of
Lisa, can you hear me? We've lost your audio.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, that's
okay.
better.
Yeah, so I'm very excited to share some of the results of the challenge, and you've all helped us with better understanding what the well-being effects are of spending time outdoors and in nature. So I have some presentation slides that I can share with you that I think will help us understand some of the results and also give us a little bit of background on how researchers study this. So hopefully everybody can see that display. Can Erin give me just a check that that looks good?
I don't see it quite yet.
Okay.
I've passed presenter privilege to you.
Okay, just give me a second. We'll get this working here. Here we go.
Perfect. It's coming up now.
There we go. First of all, I'm getting an echo of my voice. You might be wondering why a psychologist would be interested in nature and connecting to the natural environment or even environmental behavior. And so what I'm going to do today is explain a little bit to you about why psychologists study this and what we will be interested in. First of all, we're looking at why people do or do not behave in sustainable ways. And we know that people actually are responsible for some of the effects of environmental problems, but that also means that we can contribute to solutions. So environmental psychologists actually look at differences in how people behave, and we study differences also in how people are connected to nature, so what we call nature-relatedness. So I'm going to explain a little bit about what that is, and then the research that we've been doing, looking at how connectedness to nature influences our happiness, as well as the types of sustainable behaviors people engage in. And I'll then give you a summary of some of the really exciting results that we've come up with from this wonderful project that the Suzuki Foundation and I have been doing that looked at the Nature Challenge. So again, you might be thinking, why does a psychologist care about nature and the natural environment? Well, we know that human beings actually affect the land, air, and water. Unfortunately, sometimes we don't think about the consequences of our actions. But more and more researchers are now understanding that environmental problems affect human health. Not just our physical health, but also maybe our psychological health. So we're interested in trying to understand why people behave either in protective ways towards the environment or in more destructive ways. And there certainly are differences. We don't always translate our concerns for the environment into action. So for about a decade now, psychologists have been studying this, and we know that there's sometimes structural barriers. If people can't afford to buy the organic food, or maybe you don't live in a good transit system, or maybe there's no curbside recycling service. If the infrastructure isn't there, it's really hard for us to make the environmental choice. But there's also some psychological barriers that explain why people might not behave environmentally. Oftentimes, it's not the normative thing to do. We often follow what our neighbors do. If everybody's spraying pesticides on their lawn and don't like those awful dandelions, then sometimes we go along with it. But also, sometimes we feel very guilty or helpless to prevent environmental problems. So with issues such as climate change, the changes are very slow and imperceptible to human senses. So unless we're living in the north, if we see extreme changes, we may not understand that our actions are contributing to some of these problems and that we can actually help the solutions as well. One of the other things we know about in the psychology is that if we give people information, that alone does not necessarily change behavior. So if we took a poll of everybody in Canada, we'd certainly get a majority of people saying, yes, we care about nature, we want to protect nature. But sometimes that concern doesn't translate into action. And we know that there's this established gap between what we want to do, or our intentions, and what we actually do in real life. And also, we may still need to turn on light bulbs, which fires up coal plants. Or we might be tired of having dandelions on our front lawn, and so we decide to use pesticides. But people may not think about the consequences to pets that walk across those lawns, or even to wildlife. So we're interested in looking at how people behave in environmental ways or destructive ways, and what explains those differences. And we're starting to think that perhaps it's connectedness to the natural environment that helps us understand this. So I thought this little cartoon is a great illustration of this gap between our attitude and behavior. Why are they always blaming humans for global warming? Everybody knows it's cars. Well, I think that sort of sums up sometimes this attitude-behavior discrepancy. So my starting point in looking at this research was to say, well, do humans really need nature? We do really live, as Erin said, in cities, most of us, very separate from the natural environment, and many of us may not even know the plants and animals we share an ecosystem with. So it's possible that humans don't need nature. Well, some of the theorists would say, absolutely, we do. Nature is essential to our health and development. So E.O. Wilson is a sociobiologist who actually suggested that because humans evolved in the natural environment, we would have understood very early that nature and biodiversity was important for us to thrive and survive. It's unlikely that we've lost all of that learning that's embedded in our DNA, because we really have only lived in cities very recently in our evolutionary history. Now, this is just a theory, but we have some good, strong evidence for biophilia, the fact that people consistently prefer images and scenes of nature as opposed to built environments. Everybody enjoys having a pet. Cats and dogs, fish and birds are very popular. People enjoy doing outdoor activities and gardening and camping and bird watching and going for walks through their local parks. And more people visit zoos each year in the U.S. than all major sporting events combined. So I've got a photo there of Newt the polar bear, who was an international sensation. And there's also some new studies now looking at the fact that office workers who have cubicles and don't have a window are more likely to bring in plants compared to people that have a view of some nature or outdoors. So there's good evidence to suggest that, yes, we need nature. It's important. But there still seem to be some individual differences, despite this innate attraction that we all have. So I wanted to actually measure this and understand whether these differences in connection to nature might explain differences in environmental behavior, as well as happiness. So in order to do that, my colleagues and I needed to come up with a way to actually measure individual differences. So in psychology, what we do is we develop instruments to actually quantify these things and be able to test them on people and use them. And so we decided that we would come up with a construct we call nature relatedness. And nature relatedness is really just a word that describes this subjective connection we have with nature. And it's partly cognitive. It's our beliefs about nature and what we think about the natural world around us. It's our sense of identity. So for some of us, we may feel that our self-concept includes the natural environment. It's also emotional or affective. So it's a visceral reaction towards plants and animals and how we feel when we're outside in the natural world. It's also the way we feel about other creatures and how we should use the Earth's resources. And then finally, we also think an important part of our connectedness involves our experience. So it's how drawn we are to nature. Do we enjoy getting outside, getting dirt on our hands? Do we like being outside even on unpleasant weather in the middle of winter or on a soggy, rainy day in downtown Vancouver? Well, we devised a scale that people self-report. They fill out 21 items, and actually everybody who completed the challenge was kind enough to fill out that scale. You all tested your own nature relatedness. Well, this scale is relatively internally consistent, so it does a fairly good job of measuring this idea of connectedness. And it's also fairly stable. So we think of it as similar to a personality trait in that it's relatively fixed, but it is possible perhaps to change this over time. And we've looked at some dimensionality of the scale in terms of how it includes these things like a self-identity or self-concept, as well as emotional and cognitive and experiential aspects. But we're going to just really talk about nature relatedness as a general construct today. These are some of the items that are in the scale, which you may have recalled filling out. You answered about whether your relationship was an important part of who you are, whether you felt connected to all living things in the earth, maybe your opinions about plants and animals, that they should or should not have fewer rights than humans. And then we asked some experiential questions too. Do you enjoy being outdoors in unpleasant weather or take notice of wildlife even in the middle of the city, for example? When we were trying to test whether the skill did a good job of predicting actual behavior, we asked people about things that we thought might be indicative of differences in nature relatedness. So whether people own pets and buy organic, whether they volunteer with environmental organizations such as the Suzuki Foundation. And what we found is that when we looked at how nature relatedness predicts those behaviors, it does a very good job of doing that. But it also does a better job of predicting behavior than other kinds of environmental attitude scales. And part of the reason for that is we can measure environmental attitudes, but someone might be concerned about a landfill in their neighborhood or their property values, and this might not really be because they're connected to the natural environment. There's various different motivations for why people might behave environmentally. But we think that nature relatedness actually does a really good job of predicting how people behave in environmentally friendly ways. Okay, so to take a step aside here, initially my interest was to look at how being connected to nature might also help us understand differences in happiness. So I'm happiest when I'm outdoors, even in bad weather, most often when I'm paddling my canoe or going for a walk through a local green space with my dog. But I wondered, well, maybe not everybody feels that same way. And if I feel so much joy when I'm outdoors in nature, maybe this can help us understand why some people are unhappy if they're disconnected from the natural environment. Now, there's some really good research now about how nature is beneficial for our physical and mental health. Eva Stelab and Alan Logan's fantastic book, Your Brain on Nature, is an easy read, and it really compiles all the latest research evidence about how nature is healthy for us. So there have been lots of studies now looking at how children who are in nature-deprived areas in downtown urban cores, who may never even see the night stars, for example, when they're exposed to nature and taken on walks through parks, their self-esteem increases, their self-efficacy increases, they have better self-control. They have lower aggression, and they feel more compassion for the natural environment. There's also research done in Europe that looks at how outdoor playgrounds and outdoor kindergartens benefit children's developmental processes. Children are better able to self-regulate and delay their sense of gratification if they have those opportunities to explore. There's something important and fundamental to our developmental process that we need to play with mud and pick up sticks and be creative and imaginative as we're growing up. There's also opportunities for children when they're walking to school to observe wildlife, to interact with their parents and their peers. And there's some studies now showing that the more walkable places are in our communities, it lowers our obesity rates compared to driving. There's also some large epidemiological studies now that are being done in Europe that show that even just being near a green space, even if you don't use it, just having that nearby in your neighborhood helps reduce some of the inequality that's associated with an income gap, as well as actually helping us live longer. There's also some great research done by Frances Crowe at the University of Illinois. She looks at how exposure to nature helps reduce attention deficit hyperactivity disorder symptoms in children. And there's some great researchers now in Toronto, Canada, who are doing research showing that short walks in nature can actually reduce Alzheimer's symptoms in the elderly. So there's lots of great research out there that says nature is really important for our physical health. Hospital patients who are assigned to a nature view actually recover faster. They use less pain medication, and their nurses complain about them less compared to people that just have a view of some built environment. Forest bathing research in Japan, or Shinrin Yoku, is amazing cutting-edge research showing that experiencing the forest environment can actually increase your natural killer cell activity, which is important in fighting viruses and cancer. It reduces the stress hormone in our body called cortisol, and it helps our heart rate. So there's all this excellent research now helping us understand that nature is really essential for our physical health. Part of this might be because of what the Kaplans, great researchers in Michigan, refer to as attention restoration theory. And they believe that even glancing out a window helps us relax, helps us feel less frustrated with our job, because nature evokes this effortless, soft fascination. It doesn't require hard attention the way surfing the internet or watching TV does. And we need that restoration to help us recover from a long day in the built environment. So nature restores us, whereas our built environments actually deplete us, and we only have a limited amount of these attentional resources. So all of this suggests that if nature has these benefits for our physical health, it should also be beneficial for our psychological health. So a lot of the research that I had looked at was really looking at nature as restorative, helping to reduce stress, but not considering it as a potential source of personal happiness. And as psychologists, when we study happiness, we actually have a hard time quantifying it because it's a really large, broad construct. So instead, we look at manifestations or indicators of happiness, things like how satisfied we are with our life, subjectively how happy we feel we are, how much positive emotion we have versus negative emotion, how much fascination and awe we feel, and how much we have low levels of depression. So those are some of the ways we measure happiness, but we also include things like having a sense of personal growth and purpose in life, feeling autonomous and able to choose our own path in the world, and also feeling vital and energetic and alive. So these are all indicators of happiness, and these are things that we measure and then examine for their relationship with things like nature relatedness. So what we find is when we measure this in students and business people and stay-at-home mothers and working people, every different kind of people across Canada and in other countries where we've done our research for the past 10 years, what we find is that the higher in nature relatedness people are, the more connected they are to nature, the more they also report being happy in all of these different types of happiness. And what we've done is try to understand how nature relatedness might be different in predicting happiness compared to environmental attitudes. So when we control for those environmental attitude measures, we find that nature relatedness is actually a much better predictor of happiness. In some cases, being environmental is actually not good for our happiness. There's a certain amount of worry and concern that comes along with being aware of environmental problems. But what we're finding is that people are still able to be aware of those issues, but feel positive about their own relationship with the natural environment. And when we do these studies looking at how business people spend time outdoors in their leisure time, what we find is that if people get outside, the more time they spend outdoors, the better they feel satisfied with their job. So there's this spillover effect from what we do in our spare time that helps us cope and feel happier in the other areas of our life. So all of this research led my colleagues and I to think, well, there are some good things that go along with nature relatedness. How can we try and improve this? Can we increase people's sense of nature relatedness? If we could, it might help people become happier and maybe motivate more environmental behavior. So we've conducted some studies where we've looked at how university students learning about ecology, learning about plants and animals and biology and geography, natural history, how that knowledge might actually contribute to a greater sense of connectedness. And so what we did is we measured students at our university at the beginning of the term and again at the end of the term, and we measured their changes in nature relatedness as well as their attitudes towards environmental policies and their happiness over about a 3-month period. Now what we found is that in general, the students who were in the environmental courses maintained their nature relatedness at a very unpleasant time of year. So when we first measured our students in September, the weather was lovely, there were beautiful fall colors, it was quite pleasant temperatures. As we got into December, everybody was getting a bit grouchy because of freezing rain and it's dark at 4 o'clock, and also exams are looming for students. But for the students who are taking those environmental courses, they actually maintained their connectedness to nature as well as their happiness over that 3-month period. The students that weren't learning about plants and animals and ecosystems actually had a decrease in happiness as well as nature-relatedness. So clearly we need to work on our interventions, but we are really encouraged by the fact that something as subtle as the type of courses students enroll in at university might have an influence on their happiness. And not surprisingly, the students who take environmental education classes also were more likely to endorse sustainable behaviors. And this was as a result of their nature-relatedness. So we think of this as a potential happy path to sustainability, whereby the positive emotions that people experience when they're outdoors and in contact with nature and feeling connected actually inspire people to want to protect that environment. So this stands in contrast to some of the doom and gloom and fear-inducing messages that we sometimes hear about the natural environment. So we were interested in not just how this trait-like connection to nature might influence happiness, but we conducted another line of research where we wanted to look at how people might be able to feel connected to nature and happy in the moment. So going for that brief walk outside at lunchtime, or spending time interacting with your family or your pets after work in the backyard, or tending to the plants that you have in your house. So what we did is we conducted another series of studies, and this time we randomly assigned students at our university to walk either outdoors between our campus buildings, and as you can see in the picture, this area looks similar to a city park. We also randomly assigned other students to walk inside through our tunnel system, which is frequently used by students and faculty and staff in the winter months, but it's even used on pleasant days. What we did is we asked people how they felt after going for a brief 15-minute walk in these two different environments. Now, this probably won't surprise many of us, but people do prefer the outdoor walk. So they feel more positive emotions and less negative emotions. The indoor walk actually wasn't very pleasant. There were significant differences. People felt more negative moods and less positive moods. But what really puzzled us when we did this research was that we would see people walking through the tunnels, even on very pleasant days. And this study was run in September and October, and we never did it in the rain, so nobody's questionnaires got soggy. But we were puzzled as to why people would be missing out on the happiness benefits of just a brief 15-minute walk in nature. So this time we conducted another study, but in this session we asked people to predict how they would feel at the end of their walks. So they were still randomly assigned to walk indoors or outdoors, but this time we got a mood prediction from them. And what we found was that people expect the outdoor walk to be a lot more pleasant, but it's even better than they can imagine. So in other words, people are making errors in what we call affective forecasting. And we predict our emotions all the time when we're trying to figure out what to eat for dinner, or who to date, or what movie to go see. But it seems that perhaps people are making errors in the predictions of their happiness around different types of environments. So outdoor environments are much better than we think, but it also means that indoor environments are not as happiness-inducing as we think. This might help us explain why at the end of a long, hard day, we come home and instead of getting some nature time, we sometimes surf the internet or stay inside. We did some further research thinking that, well, perhaps people who are experts in environmental actions and education might be better at predicting these happiness benefits of nature. But what we found is that even people who do outdoor education work, when we asked them to predict how they would feel during a mock canoe trip or a forest ecology walk, even they underpredicted nature's benefits. So what this tells us is that we need to correct some of these errors that people are perhaps experiencing in order to try and increase nature contact. What we learned from our campus walk studies is that if we take people outside in nature, even for a leisurely 15-minute walk, we can actually help people to feel more connected to the natural environment. So walking indoors doesn't help people feel connected, whereas walking outdoors does. Now, there's a number of other ways we're exploring to try and help people become more connected to the natural environment and learn more about ecology. There's an organization in the United States called Adventurers and Scientists for Conservation that partners up researchers with average, everyday citizen scientists who want to help contribute to ecology projects. So this group of folks is actually in Montana, and they're doing some non-invasive grizzly bear tracking. So these people go out for a weekend and they learn how to collect DNA samples from hair and measure footprints, and then they send that information back to researchers who would have a hard time getting outside and experiencing those different locations. Well, what we find is that when people do this type of citizen science work, really contributing to information about the natural environment, they're actually happier and they feel more connected to the natural environment. So some other citizen science projects that we have on the go look at how helping to categorize wildlife images can help people feel more connected to nature and increase their well-being. I work with an ecologist at Trinity College in Connecticut, and right now we're doing a project with science teachers across Canada and the United States, helping to understand how scavenger behavior is affected by the type of composting people do in their backyard. So this is a great project that helps people contribute directly to the science. And we think this is also a great way for people to connect with nature. So most of the research that we've done has suggested that we need to learn more. We know that nature connectedness is good for people. It helps improve well-being and motivates environmental behavior. But we don't know how long the effects last. Does it last 2 or 3 days? We're not sure yet. Some of the physiological research about forest bathing in Japan suggests that the longer you spend time in nature, the longer the beneficial effects on cortisol and natural killer cells will be. But we need to look at what the mechanisms are. Is it sunlight? Being outside in really pleasant weather makes people feel happier, certainly. We need to figure out how to design our cities so that people can have access to nature easily and not tucked away in a remote wilderness area. Not everybody can get to the national parks. But we need to incorporate more of a health message as well into our environmental framing. So many of the messages that we see about environmental behavior don't give us information about how nature can improve our well-being and how we can contribute to the solution. Sometimes they invoke fear and feelings of emotions like guilt. We suggest that perhaps we need to think about some alternative messaging, how to get people more connected to the natural environment and help us realize that it's actually good for us as well as the planet. So here's another suggestion of a campaign that we're testing at several universities in Ottawa, looking at how incorporating more elements of nature-relatedness might help people be more motivated to behave in environmentally sustainable ways. So some of the benefits of being connected mean that the preservation of the natural environment and human well-being are actually not competing goals. They don't have to conflict. That these things are interconnected. Our health is dependent on the health of the environment. And we need to have multidisciplinary collaboration. Environmental problems such as climate change aren't going to be solved purely by natural sciences. We need to have psychologists and geographers and natural history educators working on these things too. So with all this in mind, I was very excited to contribute to some of the research efforts going on around the Nature Challenge. So we were interested in studying what the effects of some repeated nature contact was. Does spending more time outdoors in nature actually promote a greater sense of connectedness to nature? And does this actually benefit people's well-being? So we asked everybody to take our questionnaire way back at the beginning of May, and then again to follow up with a questionnaire very recently to see how people had done with the challenge. So we had many people who very kindly participated and signed up for the challenge, took it on, there were about 6,400 people who did the English version of our survey at the beginning of May. And then about a third of those people returned to do the survey at the end of May and early June. And we had a wide range of ages, people participating, everybody from late teens all the way up to age 83. And most of our participants were actually women. For the French survey, we had about 935 people, so everything was translated, and Francophone Canadians participated. And again, about a third of those people came back and did a follow-up survey at the end of May. And we see a similar pattern of results across the two different surveys, so I'm going to show you just the general pattern of results rather than breaking it down by French and English. But it's really quite exciting, and by completing the survey twice, what this does is allows us to see how people's experiences change over the time of that 30 days and whether they've spent more time in nature and whether that contact actually keeps happiness. So I don't know, Erin, if you want to jump in at any point here and comment on these results, but what I'm showing first here is the breakdown of time use. So we asked folks to report on how many hours a week they spent in a variety of different activities, everything from their nature contact, which you'll see is highlighted here, as well as time spent in the gym or traveling in a vehicle or surfing the internet and even sleeping. And then what we can do is compare at the end of May how people are doing in terms of that time use. So you'll see here that about 4% of people's time is spent with nature contact. And that's not a lot of time really, but when we look at how that changes by the end of May, we actually see that that's almost double. So the amount of hours people are getting outdoors in nature by the end of the month is almost doubled. So I think that's really exciting. Some of those other activities seem to remain fairly similar, but folks were definitely taking up the challenge and spending time outdoors in nature. Here's another way to look at just the statistical analysis of the findings. It's just a simple t-test here, paired samples, looking at how much time people reported spending on average in a week, how many hours at the beginning of May, and then again at the end of May, early June when they did the second survey. So I think that nicely reflects the fact that people were really excited about getting outside at a time of year where it's relatively pleasant. Lots of comments people made suggested that they really enjoyed their time outdoors, that they were reminded on how important it was to take that time every day, that they felt more relaxed and refreshed. The French results look quite similar, as you can see here. As well, our Francophone participants had almost a third increase in their connectedness by getting outside regularly at the end of the study. So one of the things we were really interested in looking at was if spending this time outdoors in nature might make people feel a little bit more connected at that trait level, whether people felt like they really were a part of nature. And it seems that that was the case. So on average, the entire group of people who did the survey at the first and second time, everybody felt slightly more connected to nature at the end of the study than they did at the beginning. And that's very likely as a result of spending that increased time outdoors in the natural environment. So that's exciting to know that we can increase our nature relatedness. I think what's also exciting is that when we look at how people were doing in terms of the other indicators of well-being in their life, for example, those who are participating as part of their work programs, people felt more productive at the end of May than at the beginning. Now that we don't know for sure whether that's as a result of spending time outdoors in nature, but we know that as a group, that's what everybody was doing. People also reported having a greater sense of energy or vitality at the end of the study as opposed to at the beginning. So that nature time often makes us feel more alive and energetic. It's a different way of measuring happiness than just having positive moods. And we suspect that nature contact is particularly good for our vitality. People felt less stressed at the end of the month compared to at the beginning. And again, that may be because people are spending time outdoors and in nature. It could also be the time of year. It might be that people are taking more holiday days, or they're just enjoying the weather more. But it's nice to see that perhaps people are getting outdoors more and trying to use nature's restorative properties to help them cope with the daily struggles and hassles that we sometimes experience. We saw a slight increase in sleep quality as well from the beginning compared to the end of the month. And again, if we get outside, outdoors, and in nature, that's going to benefit our physical health as well as our mental health. People felt fewer negative emotions, so they felt less negativity and also felt a greater sense of calm and peacefulness. So in terms of the challenge, those are the findings of the survey. I guess the message that I'm hoping we take home with us is that there's many ways to increase our personal well-being and promote a healthy, happy lifestyle. But getting outdoors and in contact with nature is one way to do that. It's relatively easy for us. It doesn't have to be remote wilderness. It can be nearby nature. And by doing this, we're also more likely to feel connected to our planet. There's some also great research showing that when people feel connected to nature and spend time outdoors, we actually become more generous and caring towards each other as well. So I think the message here is that if we try and work on having a healthy planet, we'll also have happy people and a happy planet.
Elizabeth, that's really interesting. It's Nina here at the David Suzuki Foundation in Vancouver. Very interesting things to listen to, and I guess I have a question just to get us started off. And please, people, send in questions if you want to. Send them to me, the WebEx administrator. But I guess I'm curious what you might like to test next, or what you'd like to learn, where you feel, I mean, obviously there's not a direct causal relationship between what you observed and the time in nature, but we can guess that it might have had an effect. But if you could do another study and zero in on something, what would you be curious to know about?
Well, we have a lot of studies in the works. It's exciting research because we don't really fully understand how nature relatedness develops. So there's good suggestions that it may be early life experiences in our childhood. There's some researchers that are looking into that. We're also really interested in trying to understand what the mechanisms are that are responsible for the positive emotions we experience when we're in nature. So what is it about nature? Is it the smell? Is it the sights? Is it the sounds? Is it tactile experiences? There's patterns in waves. There's researchers now looking at aquatic environments and why water is so soothing. So I think we need to understand those things as well to then try and tap into ways to get people more connected. But there really is a positive feedback loop. If we spend time in a place that makes us feel good, we're going to want to go back and do that again, and we're going to want to preserve that place so that we can continue going there, and so we can have that for future generations. But we still need to understand how we can try and restore connectedness to people that are afraid of nature. You know, I mean, I certainly am biased. I enjoy being outdoors. I still have a fear of large bugs, but I'm pretty connected to the natural environment. But not everybody feels that way, and there's certainly some aspects of nature that are scary and uncomfortable, or that might even seem disgusting or gross to people. And if you're not used to being outdoors, it can be a frightening experience, being in a wilderness environment or being alone. So I think we need to understand how we overcome that disconnection and try and help people.
That comes to a question that we have from one participant that maybe Erin might be able to answer, which is which activities were the ones that seemed to be most popular? I'm not sure if we know this, but Erin, maybe you were watching the types of things that got excitement on social media, et cetera, or where the biggest photos came from. So can you comment on that, Erin? Which activities seem to be most exciting to people?
Sure, and again, that wasn't part of our research, but just anecdotally looking at the pictures and some of the feedback that we've had, I know within the workplace wellness program, one of the most popular and probably the easiest thing for people to do was outdoor meetings. And so that was really wonderful to see. We had definitely some pictures of people enjoying their lunch break outside, kicking around a soccer ball or playing Frisbee. But a lot of people actually just held their weekly meetings outside, and that's something that we try to do here at DSF. So that was definitely one activity. Just for the average everyday person, also taking walks in the evening or walking to work. So those are some of the things that we tended to see. And certainly they're easy. This is not meant to be another thing to add to our to-do list. This is really meant to be something that everybody can do. I live right here in Toronto. It's Canada's busiest city, and even I can find ways to connect with nature every day. So that's really what it's about.
I think active commuting too is a really wonderful way. One of the benefits of doing what we call which is biking or walking or cycling to work or rollerblading, is that it's healthy for you, but it's also healthy for the planet, and it usually saves you a little bit of money as well. So I know I noticed in some of the comments, people said they really enjoyed their daily bike ride to work, or their walk to work is a time where they actually reflect and take a moment, and they usually find they come up with all sorts of interesting thoughts and ideas, or they can even work out problems as they're walking.
Lisa, there's a question about whether there's a way to distinguish the benefits from just exercise or whether it's contact with nature, and are you able to discern between those two?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And actually, one of my colleagues did a study with a student we had where he actually was testing both people walking outdoors in nature, but also just sitting. Our walks were actually at a very moderate pace because we did not want increased heart rate to be a confound. But the people who walked indoors and outdoors definitely walked at the same pace, and so we still only found that effect of happiness with the outdoor walks. But he found the same thing for sitting. So just sitting still and enjoying the natural environment seems to produce the same mood effects. One interesting finding we got from that study, though, was that for people who are highly connected to nature, they actually seem to need to be outdoors more to be happy. In other words, maybe they have a better sense of how important it is for their well-being, because when you're a highly nature-related person and you have to sit inside, it's not good for your mood.
Great, thanks. And a question about your research design. Just getting back to that one here. When you're talking to people, it can be challenging not to lead the participant into the results that the researcher might want to receive. So how did you take precautions to make sure that the questionnaire and the survey work was not leading?
Well, usually when we do research, we don't tell people that we're studying nature relatedness. That wouldn't be a good idea, first of all, because that would put a bias into the research. We don't necessarily know what we're going to find at the outset of the study, so we're exploring how people feel in different environments. And so usually that's what we ask people. We're interested in your perceptions and your mood in different environments. And then, you know, we take the conclusions as they come. When we're doing a study like the 30-30 challenge, it's quite different because we know that people who are passionate about the environment and involved with the David Suzuki Foundation are really a unique group of people. So this is a bunch of people who probably already have a good sense of the benefits of getting outdoors and in contact with nature. So it means that we can't really generalize these findings to everyone across Canada. But when we do our studies with business people and students, and we have done international studies, we do consistently find these links between well-being and connectedness to nature. What we do is we're careful about how we ask questions. We don't always give people the full nature relatedness scale in its format. We sometimes ask a variety of other questions about people's personalities, their background, and their well-being. So it's not quite as obvious what we're measuring, and that helps reduce some of the demand characteristics. It's a good question. It's something that's really challenging, actually, in environmental research, because there's sometimes a stigma to ask people about environmental behavior. There is some social desirability there, but we try and account for that with the type of questionnaires that we use.
Right, great. A question now that it could be for Lisa or for Erin. I'll let you guys decide. What did the team discover was most effective in generating participation in the workplace program? What types of partnerships or leadership commitment, and also how many workplaces participated? Erin, do you want to start off with that one?
Sure. So we have probably close to 300 workplaces across Canada and in other countries download the workplace toolkit, and most of those were participating. I think we're going to wait for some of the follow-up feedback and surveys to know what worked best, and certainly that's one of the things I'm very interested in, is how we can support workplaces going forward. Again, just anecdotally, what seemed to work is if there was an internal champion, so whether it was an HR wellness specialist, whether it was just a nature enthusiast, or maybe a member of the green team, having somebody internally share the messaging and be enthusiastic, maybe host outdoor meetings or a picnic, keeping it fun and light and simple. I think those are the things that seem to work best. The little tidbits of information that we provided, I think, were also really interesting for people. And again, just through word of mouth and through some of the emails we've got, I think people ended up learning a lot about the connections between health and nature.
Thank you. I've got a question here about cultural effect of connectedness. So are there any indications, Lisa, that's a good question for you, are there any indications of the cultural effect of connectedness to nature and emotional response to nature? So, for example, do people of Chinese or European origin respond differently to exposure to nature?
Yeah, that's a fascinating area of research, and we're very fortunate that the nature relatedness scale has been translated into several different languages. So it's just been translated into Korean, Turkish, French recently, and so researchers in other places are using the scale. They do find these same relationships with well-being and nature relatedness. But I think we need to do far more work to understand the subjective experience people have, and even how people view nature is different depending on your cultural background. We also really need to engage Aboriginal people who have already a connectedness with the natural environment inherent in their spirituality. So it's a new area of research that we don't know a lot about, but the scale is being used, and we do find these consistent links between well-being and connectedness in different cultures, but it's very, very early research still.
Good to know we have room to explore.
Yes.
Exploring. Any last comments, Lisa or Erin, about what we've learned and where we're heading next with 30 by 30?
I think I'd just like to say that the reason I got into this line of research was really because I think positive psychology offers a fascinating way to approach environmental problems. You know, as psychologists, we know that when people get discouraged and overwhelmed and they become helpless, they don't become engaged, they don't take action. And so I think we need to very carefully frame messages that don't present a superficial, you know, idea that happiness is the only thing important in life, but rather taps into the fact that we evolved in nature and humans need nature. Our health is interdependent with the health of our planet. That's a serious message, and it can be a depressing message at times, but I think there is so much joy and positive, you know, health aspects that we can take from nature that we should be focusing on that, along with looking at how to solve some of the problems of destruction.
Hi, and maybe this is just Erin again in Toronto. You know, first of all, I'd love to thank Lisa for all of the work. She's had quite a heavy travel schedule, but has been doing an amazing job for us in helping us with this research. So thank you to you, Lisa. I think to me, what I'm really excited about is what Lisa terms the happy path of sustainability, because, you know, environmental work can be tough. But I think something that every person can relate to, especially every working person or person who lives in the city, is that, you know, life is busy and it can be very stressful. And I think we're all looking for ways to find more peace, to sleep better, to feel healthier, to feel more vital, and to have more meaning. And I think time in nature, especially when we can do it together, is an amazing way to not only to feel better, but also to help the planet. And if we're trying to expand the circle of the environmental community, I think this is a great way to do it, because I don't know anybody that can't relate to wanting more time, more downtime, more time to relax and enjoy. So for me, that's what this campaign is about. And I really want to thank everybody that participated and promoted it in their workplace as well. And I look forward to hearing your feedback.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. We did record this presentation, and once I figure out how to make it available through the David Suzuki website, we will do that. It's been really interesting. Thanks both to Erin, our Senior Public Engagement Specialist in Toronto, and to Lisa Nisbet at Trent University. We'll wrap it up now, but please stay tuned, and thank you all for participating and helping us learn as we go. Have a great day in nature.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.